Training apex-level hypnotherapists and psychotherapists since 1988, the Institute for Psychosystems Analysis is now accepting applications for CADA 3 of our professional training course, taught online by Steve, Pauline and myself. If you resonate with the material on Jung To Live By and believe that your calling is to be a therapist, then check out the link to our course webpage in the description. We look forward to welcoming you on board in June of this year, 2021. And this question comes from Alex Brandt, and he says, could I have some advice on what to do if I feel that I've perhaps taken the idea of radical honesty too far by writing an autobiography, and it's left me feeling like a robot a lot of the time, if not for all of the nightmares. Before writing it, I would have described myself as lazy and capricious. After writing it, I feel manic and distrusting. What do you think, Steve?
Wow. Okay, Alex. What you've obviously done, setting aside the surface structure of what you say, and I'm not disregarding it, I'm just setting it aside and looking for what might really be happening, is that you've engaged in a creative act outside of yourself, but at the same time towards yourself, because an autobiography is an attempt at becoming more conscious. That's fundamentally what it is. More conscious of yourself. But it's an extremely difficult thing to do, as Jung himself noted, with any kind of objective honesty. So straight away it creates a paradox. But that paradox in itself is only a reflection of another one. And that one is the nature of what Jung called the unconscious. And I say what Jung called it because there are different perspectives on it, and what Jung referred to as being the normal ego consciousness. There is a communication between the two that's mediated through creativity, which is unusual. And an autobiography is a highly personal form of communication. You're almost writing a script for yourself to understand yourself by, and you'll be aware of the limitations of that medium as you write. You'll be aware of elements that Jung would have described as being your shadow, and then all of the other constructs, I'll call them constructs, that Jung used, such as the anima, the self archetype, and the rest of that ecology. You'll be measuring yourself against them, and your unconscious will respond to that act. And it will stir things up. So I'm not at all surprised that you report feeling that way after indulging, shall I say, in that. Anybody would. Any writer that addresses themselves in that way would find that. If you were writing, say, a film script or a novel or series of novels, whatever, creatively, you would bypass a lot of the issues that you would otherwise find in an autobiography. The elements are still there, but there is some remove. And you'll find that the unconscious will be kinder to you if you were to write a work of creative fiction rather than an attempt to write an autobiography. The conflict in constructing and writing an autobiography is, at the best of times, severe. Whereas if you give the unconscious an opportunity to present itself as it wants to by producing characters and a narrative, it's a lot easier on you. It's still intense, but it's a lot easier. So I would say understand what's happened, respect it. That will, if you can hold that consciously, that will indicate to the psyche, to your unconscious mind, that you realise and accept why you've flitted into this particular state. That will probably cause a reduction in tension immediately. Then think about writing in a different way, a creative writing venture. And then basically say to your psyche, the stage is yours. I'll be the medium for the expression of what you want to communicate rather than what perhaps my ego wants to communicate. And when you do that, you will get a completely different kind of communication and a different kind of energy. There will be stresses, but they will be different to the stresses inherent in writing an autobiography. But when you look back, I would suggest you look back in this way. Look back on the attempt at writing an autobiography as an unconscious attempt to kick you into a new state of adaptation by generating the very conditions of tension that would move you on creatively into being a writer of a different kind. We sometimes have to face this about ourselves first and foremost before we can be free enough to let the unconscious come through. And I speak as someone who has written an autobiography, and I found it very, very tense and a disturbing experience. It's probably not the time to go through it here because this is your time and your question I'm answering. But I had a series of stressful and recurring dreams that did not begin to abate until I wrote the autobiography. But it generated other issues for me that meant that I would then become a different kind of writer. And I was able, after the fact, to look back and see how the through line was working through. My work with creatives since then, in the film industry, and purely through psychotherapy as well, has suggested that what I've offered to you today is probably what's really happening for you. So it's a stage of adaptation you're going through, but seize the moment, be kind to yourself and be respectful to the unconscious. Everything will work out fine for you then.
Do you mind if I take a slightly different take on this, which is not necessarily related to the question, but when I saw the phrase radical honesty, the therapy mode kicked into gear. So I was thinking to myself, what would I think or feel if someone came into me saying, I've been radically honest? I'd think they were trying to hide something. Not about this particular guy's question, but it's just something to bear in mind. It's like, I've been radically honest, and now I feel manic and distrusting. It's like that could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like there's potential here that a complex has potentially led this guy astray, maybe in looking at what's happened within the autobiography. I would say, because radical honesty, it's like, what does that phrase mean? What's the difference between radical honesty and honesty? It's like, so that's what drew my attention.
I agree. I wondered where the phrase came from. I know it is out there on the internet. People talk about that in relation to certain internet gurus, for example, and that might be where that influence came from.
Leading them to nightmares, for example. We've discussed nightmares recently on some of our Q&A podcasts. And it might be useful for you to look up that and then evaluate it in that context. For sure, that could be an effect. If you try to be radically honest, then you're going to get a reaction from the psyche, for sure. Because any kind of polarity generates tension. That's why I say it's best if you do not conceive of polarities as such, because you're creating a neurosis. A neurotic condition is a division that is defined by opposition. A properly regulated psyche exchanges energy and information across a bandwidth between opposites, but you're not meant to oscillate between extremes. You're meant to operate within tolerances that exchange freely energy and information. So that's just one general point. I would say, though, that the most perhaps constructive and productive way for you to go ahead is to think creatively. And the hidden purpose probably in writing your autobiography was to create a tension out from which you develop as a writer and therefore someone who communicates creatively and artistically with the unconscious. So you probably have to go through this phase like any other adaptive phase in life. And this is an adaptive phase for you as a creative, but you will bring forward that which you have accumulated thus far, the adaptations, the maladaptations, and everything in between, and that might be what's surfacing as this idea of radical honesty and then the tension that you feel as a result. If you're looking to take your study of depth psychology and personal development to the next level using Steve and Pauline's 40-year-long clinical experience as your personal guide, then make sure you check out Jung To Live By's flagship offering, Discover Your Personal Myth Ultimate Handbook. For anyone who has a calling deep in their very genome to become who they truly feel they should be, this guide is utterly indispensable. Pick up your copy today and make 2021 the year you truly begin to become yourself.